Hi, everyone. My name is Suman. I am the CEO and co-founder of Marco, which is an experiences platform that helps companies and teams find best-in-class experiences. And as part of that, we've started a podcast called Marco Labs, which basically we interview the creators that are part of our platform to tell the stories about why they're passionate about what they do, and the people leaders to tell their stories about the companies they've worked with, the experience they've had, especially as the future of work shifts. And so super excited for this particular episode because we have Jenn Cornelius, who is not only a really accomplished people leader, but also an advisor for Marco. So we know each other pretty well. Sometimes these conversations are more introductory and we're getting to know each other, but Jenn and I talk pretty frequently. So this should be super fun. And with that, we always start off just kind of by introductions. And so I know about your background, of course, Jenn, but would love to kind of, hear about what your career, kind of the different places you've worked, why you're passionate about the people space, and just allow us to get to know you a bit.
Perfect. Suman, thank you so much for having me. And as he mentioned, we do know each other well, so I'll try to make sure I'm digging into details because I know he knows some of them, but the goal is to share with you. And I feel really grateful to have this conversation. So a little bit about me. So I actually started my early career in operations, and I think it's important because it sort of helps shape how I think about the world and the work today. My very first job was as a sales associate at a clothing store, and I loved customer service. And I still now have really thought through, how do I make choices that allow me to interact with people and to serve customers and to do work that allows me to be close to the customer. So started out early career in operations. At one point, moved into training, and then that sort of transitioned into HR, and worked with brands early on, like Starbucks, where I learned about a really incredible employee experience, and how to really deeply connect with people. I also worked with Apple for many years. And as an HR professional at Apple, I did lots of different things in the HR realm, but I really developed a passion, which has sort of served me the last 10 to 15 years now. And that is around kind of the org development and org effectiveness space. And so, Apple's a really interesting company, right? Because it's big, it's complex, it's organized by verticals. There's a lot of people. So there's a lot of fun people work that exists within the organization. And I think having an operational lens as an HR person is useful because you can look at the business and understand that people are an asset, not a commodity, in the business, and really think about how you maximize their skills and gifts. And so I got to do a lot of that at Apple. And then my life changed. And at Apple, I had all my life events. I got married. I had all three of my children, my girls. One of my daughters was diagnosed with cancer. And also that same daughter passed away in 2017. And that was a really important life moment because even though Apple was really incredible in supporting me, and I'm forever grateful for the experiences I had, because of the nature of the work I had and the kind of travel and the scope in a big company, it just, for me, became more than what I was willing to kind of give up. And so I took a turn far right and left this really incredible big job and decided I would do something really different. And I went to a small fast casual startup called Sweet Green. Had never done food before, had never been a chief people officer before. So I was able to kind of really, start something different and learn about what it meant to build infrastructure and scale, and also be home and putting my kids to bed every night, which was really the reason I made the decision. Since then, that was just a few years ago. I was with Sweet Green. I then took a turn again when the pandemic hit as a working mom, decided to be at home and help my kindergartner learn how to distance learn. And so I took some time off. Then I started a consulting company, and I'm getting to the end of the story, I promise. But I ended up, starting to work with some really incredible CEOs. And this is actually how I met Suman through the process, actually, was when I had Simple Collective, my consulting company, and have gotten a chance to kind of dig in with different businesses and really understand, deeply the startup space. And what I love about this space of kind of smaller to mid-sized companies from an HR standpoint is, you really get to build from the ground floor. And my gift to the world is maximizing other people's gifts. And so that's what I've learned I'm great at. And so I get to do that all day, every day, both in some of the work I do still as an advisor, but also as the chief people officer at the place I am now, which is Ritual, LA-based startup. And that's my story. So hopefully not too long, but that's how I ended up here.
No, certainly not too long, and a lot to react to. The first thing I would react to is thank you for sharing some of the personal aspects of kind of how your life, as well as like how you thought about decision making and prioritizing things that are not only work as well as life. And we've talked
Yeah.
about this before with other folks
Yeah.
that we interact with at Marco that are also people leaders, in this concept of like bringing your kind of whole self to
Mhm.
work and being
Yes.
authentic and kind of like not hiding that part.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, first of
Yeah.
all, react and saying this is a moment where I feel like that's the case, and you've always been that way, which is super refreshing. But I guess, how do you think about that just generally, perhaps
Yeah.
that ritual, but the shift towards that being comfortable, kind of talking about things that are perhaps viewed more personally in the past.
hmm Yeah, thank you for asking that. I mean, I've been really lucky because I have gotten to work for a series of leaders in the last, honestly, almost 15 years who held that same belief. And so there's an incredible leader who is still a mentor to me now. Her name is Stephanie. She's a CHRO in another big company, and she hired me at Apple. And actually, she was one of the first leaders I ever had that it was like the most unconventional interview because she didn't ask me a lot about my experience. I mean, she could see all of that on paper, but when we got together in a room, she was really curious about who I was as a person. And so, I remember my life at that time is pretty different than now, but I had lots of hobbies and, I've always liked to read. And the first conversation was really about like getting to know me. And as became the case working with Stephanie and then working with other people in that organization, that was the culture she created. It was like you got to bring your whole self. And I think, back then I didn't know that maximizing my, other people's gifts was my skill, but I think Stephanie, as a mentor really helped me understand the value of that. And she was always really keen to sort of match someone's passion, both outside of work, but if we had something at work that could translate, like she would make that happen, so I can't take the credit. I think I've refined that skill over time. And as I think about leading teams myself, and even about leading organizations, I think my values very much guide the kind of work I take on. And so whether it's a new client or, even working for an organization full time, it's really, really important to me that that organizations value the people that they are, right? And they allow humans to be humans, and that we find ways to create a safe space, ideally a brave space, if I'm quoting Brene Brown, but to allow people to show up and be their whole self. And so even when I talk to my team every day, like I'm always really interested in what's going on with them outside of work, because those things clearly have an impact on how they're showing up every day. I don't know
Yeah,
how you could, like, until robots are running the world, like if we're dealing with humans, you almost can't ignore that is what you've got in front of you. Like whether you want to
totally.
acknowledge it or not is up to you as a leader, but that's the beauty of having humans, making the decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things that I would react to there. One is, even just when we first started talking, we were connected, and I think I cold emailed you, and you reacted, and you're like, "Hey,"
hmm
and I was excited to chat with you, given your kind of really impressive background. But you were just refreshing to talk to and very authentic, and I think that I remember being like, "Can we do this again?" And then we chatted again, and I was like, "You like maybe we just do this every week," and so that was kind of the natural progression in terms of our relationship and your mentorship and advice. I also think it's interesting just leading from by example, and so the fact
hmm
that you make that safe space for people invites others to feel comfortable doing that. So that's amazing. I
hmm
would love to. You mentioned a bunch of different organizations. How is it coming from? I mean, you mentioned Starbucks, you mentioned Apple,
Yeah.
Sweet Green, which is not so small of a startup now, and then
Right.
Ritual. You worked with so many different size organizations. How does that
Yeah.
influence and kind of shape the job? Does the job differ substantially, or?
Yeah, it's, the one thing that all of those brands have in common, and I was intentional about those choices, is, they're aiming to be best in class, right? And in many cases are best in class. And I think, for me, best in class isn't just, the revenue that you deliver or, the market cap or any of that, but it's like in everything that you do, you're seeking to continuously improve and be,
Hmm.
incredible in your space. And so, that for me is really important because again, it kind of aligns with my own personal values. When I wake up in the morning, I very much for myself and even for my kids, like focus on growth mindset and think about continuous improvement. And so I think aligning, the way I spend my time, I really try to spend it in places where I know that, people want to continuously improve. They want to be open. I'm really naturally curious. So I like to be around other people that are equally curious, and want to learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, that's amazing. I would love to hear a bit about how that looks at Ritual, and I guess even what is Ritual for I've you know I've heard a lot about Ritual, and it's a great company. But what is
Yeah.
Ritual for those of folks who don't know, and kind of how big is it, and what does
Yeah.
your kind of role look like within building out the people team of a fast growing kind of company in the health space?
Yeah, I'm excited and happy to talk about Ritual. So, as I mentioned, I joined Ritual in June, and the story's sort of interesting because, as I mentioned, I was consulting up until pretty recently, and I got a phone call from Kat, who is the CEO and founder at Ritual, and I knew about the company a little bit because I'm a customer, so it's a D2C brand. We're best known for our vitamins, specifically our multivitamin, and we focus in on the pre and postnatal audience. That was really kind of our core business, for the last several years. And then recently we've expanded and will continue to expand, our product categories, and we've launched a protein. And really, what makes Ritual really special is, in my opinion, kind of two key things. One is Kat. And her founder story, which was really that she was pregnant and she couldn't find. She's somebody who really cares about what she puts into her body and always has, and eats well and takes care of herself. And she couldn't find a vitamin, a prenatal that she felt like she could trust. She was like, every time I looked at a label, I didn't understand any of the ingredients. And so she decided to create a vitamin herself. And so, part of Kat's vision was and still is around transparency, of our ingredients, and our products, and then also traceability, which is kind of new and different in this space. I mean, when you think about vitamins, you think about how ingredients are put together in a vitamin. There's not a lot that you can understand about like where they came from, where how they were sourced, et cetera. But with Ritual products, you can actually see exactly where things are made and where ingredients come from and all of that. So back to the Cat reaching out over the phone, I knew a little bit about the brand, and I actually was a customer myself. So I've been a Ritual subscriber for the last 3 years, and didn't know that we were LA based, but as it happened, we are. And Cat now is a mom of three, and me as a mom of three, had that in common, but also have in common the fact that we both care deeply about people, about their health and their well being and their wellness. We care about family. And when she talked to me about the brand that she's built, we just crossed the threshold of 110 employees. We've grown dramatically. We hired 65 people this year, so it's
Wow.
been pretty rapid growth in the last year, and we're going to continue to grow. And so to be able to come in at a time where the brand is really going to catapult, as we launch more products and we go into more categories and we hire more people. I think part of the appeal for Cat was both kind of my values and some of the brands that I've worked for, but also my experience in scale, right? And so I
Yep.
think I've taken small businesses to large businesses, and we're at this kind of tipping point where building out the infrastructure for scale, the systems, the processes, the people, the talent development, all of the things that are kind of necessary in order to take you from 100 to 500 and then 500 to 1,000. It was a really compelling proposition for me, and I think I had realized too, as much as I love doing the work, advising and getting a chance to interact with other businesses, and I think that really keeps me sharp. I also really love being a part of a community. And there's something really special about, being in community with people who share your values, and you've got a shared goal and a mission, and you're really working towards something together. So kind of all those things together were the perfect kind of recipe, if you will, for me to join the Ritual team. And it's been a really incredible, several months so far.
Well, that's great, and congrats on Ritual success as well as your own
Thank
personal success.
you.
I'm sure you were very helpful in scaling that team and continuing to scale it. I guess one question for you is so we talk a lot about culture. Obviously, that's kind of what we
Mhm.
help companies build or try to at Marco. And I guess what does the word culture mean to you? That could just be
Mm,
generally yourself as well as in the context of Ritual, and how do they think
yeah.
about culture? Because it's a lot of things to a lot of people.
It is a lot of things to a lot of people. For me, when I think about it in an organization, I mean, it's how you show up, it's how you behave. I mean, I think that you can walk into an office, and even though you can't walk into them very much now, so it's a very different kind of science experiment. But generally speaking, you can walk into, whether it's a dinner party or a bunch of friends, or it's a bunch of colleagues, and see how people are interacting, treating each other, the look on their face, the body language, and like that tells you a lot about culture, and so it's fun to be a contributor to that in an organization. And I say it that way specifically because I think very often people think it's like the chief people officer's job to drive culture. And in part, I think, our focus, because we care deeply about people and we're thinking about strategies with people that help meet business results. You're certainly, I care deeply about making sure that we're creating the space for all of those things to be positive in an organization. So we might have initiatives and schedule activities and events and behave certain ways in order to make sure that the culture and that sentiment and feeling is really positive. But where I kind of disagree, I think, with some of my peer set is like, I don't think it's just my job. And I actually have a really strong opinion about never having it in my title either, because I think it's everyone's job. I think everybody in an organization has a responsibility to contribute to the culture in some way, and that's because they're actively engaging with each other day to day, and can be a positive force for change and for outcomes with every decision that we make. So I think culture is always in my mind going to be the thing that makes or breaks a company. I know there's the old saying about like culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I
Yeah.
believe that that's true. And I think it's like it's hard,
Yeah.
like because humans are inherently, like we talked about, like they're bringing everything to work, right? Whatever happened before they showed up that day, like that's coming, and so it can be unpredictable, and it can be really like fluid. And so I think the constant focus on checking in on how people are feeling and getting their feedback and staying close to monitoring the overall sentiment and the level of connection is like really, really important. And, I do spend a lot of time thinking about that and how to solve for that, with the clients I work with and within my own organization.
Yes, I am certainly. We are a small team, and just building a culture from scratch has been both extremely challenging and rewarding.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I guess one question I have in terms of the challenges. So at Marco, we talk about culture is a lot of things, right? It's, as you
Yes.
mentioned, it's the behaviors, it's the people, of course, it's the mission, the vision. Part of that
Yep.
was unified around place, and you made a comment around people aren't coming to the office every day. We believe at
Mhm.
Marco that place is going to be in many cases
Mhm.
de-emphasized. So we think experiences are important. How do you, in order to facilitate
Yeah.
that, mold the behavior, kind of allow people to meet each other? How are y'all thinking about that at Ritual? How are you
Yeah.
thinking about the place and, now moving forward, and how you create that unified culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we're still learning, I mean, when I started at Ritual, we were just dabbling in what our point of view would be. And I think that was actually part of the reason that I was, it was a good time for me to join the organization to kind of really think through the strategy. But we sort of sat down together first and said, what do we know about who we are as a brand? And that is, we're built on traceability, transparency, trust, health. And so, how do we take those same attributes and really make sure that those are alive and well, from a people perspective too, within the team and within the brand. And so, very early on, we agreed that it was important to us, in order to maintain all of those things we just talked about, and specifically around sort of the trust and the transparency, that it would be important for our team members to get to choose what made sense for them. And so, I know, and I spent the last year and a half, running my consulting company, working with companies, trying to figure out a hybrid model, and like, how many days a week do people need to come in, and what does that look like, and how do you operationalize it? And there's nothing wrong with all of those strategies and tactics. I think, for us at Ritual, again, it was about sort of choice. And so the choice part is harder, honestly, because what it's meant for us is that we've had to get really thoughtful. And again, we're still learning about how do we create transparency to the way that we're operating in a meaningful way, to enable people to choose. So for example, in Los Angeles, the requirements around COVID, because of where our county is, our offices, you still have to wear a mask if you come into work. We made the decision to allow, because our teams frankly have like worked really productively for the last year and a half remotely. Like we weren't in any hurry to say that anybody even needed to come into the office, even if they wanted to. But we sort of said like, hey, if you're vaccinated and you want to come in, you can. And so we've had our office open since June, and have kind of slowly just been testing and seeing, like watching the volume of, what people want, why they come in, when they come in. And we've been listening, and, they're starting to tell us like, actually, we want to do the deep work at home, and we want to come in and socialize and have lunch and hang out. And so we're starting to, create programming that fosters connection in the office, and that has, we've upgraded our technology and some of our conference spaces to make sure that we can facilitate these larger hybrid meetings. And so we're testing and trying that. But along with the technology and the space is like how to facilitate, an effective, inclusive hybrid meeting. So there's some manager education that needs to happen. And so, like I said, we're experimenting with a few different areas that still hold us true to the idea that we want our team members to choose what makes sense for them based on the way they like to work, but also that we're, creating the space for connection and culture, because we've also heard from our team members. We created 3 different kind of personas for roles. And they're likely what you would guess, like some people that want to be in the office, or they have a need for the office, like our R&D team that's like blending gummy, like they're actually physically creating product. And so like they need the space for that in the office. And then we have some people who just want to socialize and, occasionally get together for cross-functional meeting. And then people that are remote. And so we allowed them to choose the persona just so we could kind of get a sense of where people are at. And then we're trying to create programming now that supports, those personas in a way that's meaningful for how they'd like to work going forward. So, like I said, definitely don't have it all figured out yet, but I do feel like we're making really positive progress, and, we're continuing to evolve the way we work. It feels like almost every week, like we've learned something new and we're sharing it. And, we've created a culture around experimentation and retros, and that's made a big difference in continuing the feedback loop with our people.
So it's so interesting because a lot of what you say, this notion of experimentation, right? And I'd love to hear about the people function. And we've talked about this, a bunch, but while the people function has always been strategic, it's now just almost a tabula rasa, and there's a lot of experimentation. It's quite strategic. So how do you think about, and it used to be the title of CHRO, and now it's Chief People Officer, right? And even just this whole function has changed. So how do you think about just this potentially kind of new age of experimentation, of figuring out the unknown in the role of the people space?
Yeah, I love that. And, and I want to comment on what you just said about sort of the change from the CHRO to the CPO title. And part of what I love about that evolution is that it really does think much broader about strategies and ideas and solutioning and process that's like outside of the traditional HR discipline realm, which I think is so needed, right? I think that's why you're seeing, really effective chief people officers have broad range experience. I mean, I know I have several colleagues that never worked in HR and now are chief people officers, right? And so they're pulling from agile methodology, or they're pulling from, other aspects. Like I think about how much I pull from my operations background and understanding what it means to own and drive a P&L and drive business results, and how do you enable that through people? So I think it's really cool to see that evolution, because it allows, certainly somebody like me, but I think about, all of my peers who I learn from every day. It allows us to play in all these different spaces, and I think gone are the days of just showing up as like a department head of HR, and now it's like we're sitting, I think about how, what it looks like for me at Ritual. It's like we sit together as an executive team of 5 and we're running the business together, and we're thinking about all the aspects of the organization. And, people's one of the biggest ones, right? Because if our people aren't happy, or if the way we're organized structurally or through our design isn't helping us deliver business outcomes, or, there's 100 different people implications that you can identify within an organization that can get solved in a variety of different ways, So like,
Yep.
I love that it's expanded the scope of the kind of work that we can do.
Yeah. And how do you see that evolving over the next couple of years? I mean, it's funny,
Yeah.
even we work with people leaders like yourself, and everyone from, administrative professionals to office managers to now new titles, employee experience professionals, right? Which my impression is that's actually a somewhat new title. But how do you think about how that looks over the next couple of years as folks begin, hopefully we emerge from COVID and begin to figure out how we kind of, can actually grow in this new normal environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm not sure that I've like fully flushed the thought. But I think one thing that I'm seeing that I'm curious about, and I think could point to something, is even just, some of the basics around, in the past when you had proximity with people, it was, managers relied on the ability to see and hear their employees to manage their performance. And I think, COVID has forced us to take a big step back and have to find different ways to understand, how people are performing, how engaged they are, what kind of outcomes they're delivering. And so it's really forcing this different kind of thinking around like, how do you drive effective output in an organization when you can't physically see and hear people? And I actually think, where I first saw the conversation a year and a half ago in some of the CPO forums was like, oh, we have to make sure we've done goal setting and that it's in a system and we can like have the OKRs and we can see it. But I actually think it's going to be even bigger than that, because it isn't just about the goals and the engagement survey, but it's like, how, if you're trying to plan for growth in the next 2 years, and you have to hire people and you have to onboard, and there's like all this complexity of like bringing people in, immersing them, making sure they have what they need, helping them be optimized for performance. Like, it's just much more complex. And so I'm excited to see what kind of new tech, what kind of new process, if there's new behavioral or leadership models that will evolve from this. If there's more, again, we can pull from other realms of the business. I think about some of the incredible CTOs I've worked with and kind of how they're thinking about process and methodology that we can continue to bring into the space. In addition to the cool stuff that's just happening in general around automation and AI and AR. So like, I think, I feel like for us, the world will be our oyster. There's going to be all these different implications that will say like, oh, because those impact people, we can talk about that, and we should really figure out how do we bring new ideas to the table to solve for the complexity, that is this new world we're living in. So that was a complicated answer perhaps, but I'm excited about it. Like, I love it changing. Like, I love the change part of it. It keeps me so energized.
Cool. Well, I think a great place to end the conversation is one of excitement, looking ahead, because it's been kind of a year and a half, 2 years of uncertainty and kind of again and again reshifts of where we're at as we kind of hopefully emerge, like I said. But I'd love to maybe end off on some lighthearted questions. So what is your favorite salad from Sweetgreen, as well as perhaps your favorite vitamin product from Ritual?
Ooh. Favorite salad from Sweetgreen is the buffalo chicken. I always try other things, but that's definitely my go-to. It's so good. I love the blend of the sweet and the spicy.
Okay, I'm more of a fish taco salad guy myself, but I'll take it. Okay.
It's a good one. And then my favorite vitamin product, I mean, it's tricky because I'm on such a I have such a ritual now with our products,
A
right? So I
ritual
mean,
with
I've been
ritual.
taking
That's the goal, I
yeah,
guess.
I've been
Yeah.
taking my multi for a while, but we have some new products in the pipeline, and we do studies and clinical trials and things like that. So there's some cool stuff that I've gotten a chance to take recently
Hmm.
in the immune space, let's say, that I am really excited about. And so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Amazing. My sister has recently had a kid, and so maybe I might ping you to see
Ooh,
what cool stuff she should be.
I would love to make sure that she has her vitamins and yours too. You know, we make a men's multi, so
What?
my
Okay,
husband loves it.
I didn't even know that. I'll have
Yes,
to get on
and our protein is like incredible. I mean,
that.
our
Okay.
protein with some coconut water is fire. I
All right.
It's
I'll have to
keeps
connect
it cool,
offline
it's
on
delicious.
all the products. Yeah.
I'll make sure you get some of that.
Okay. And perhaps the most fun thing about being a people leader and the weirdest thing you've had to do as being
Oh
a people leader.
gosh. That's a good question. I mean, the fun part, gosh, there's a million fun parts. I feel like I have the best job on the planet. I was actually just telling one of my team members today that, you know, I made it a mission when I started at Ritual as a part of my onboarding. You know, I've never worked in a company that's 100 people before. Like I've always worked in big companies. And so I set out to make sure that I get to know every single person. And so I have been on a journey over the last 4 months to get to know every single person. And one of my favorite parts of the job is just taking the time to have a conversation and hear about people's experience and knowing that I can do something about that. And so, you know, I had 4 coffee chats this week where I did just that. And I love spending time building those deep connections with our people.
Great
And
answer.
then, gosh, the weirdest part, I'm trying to think. I mean, you know, honestly, like people do weird shit, like not
Yeah,
at Ritual,
totally.
but like I could tell you some stories at a cocktail party of some of just the weird stuff that people do. And so I wish I could give you a really good example.
But
But
maybe part of it is, hey, it's weird, but you're such a great people leader that you can't even share, right? That's
I
the
can't, well, you know what? Honestly, there's not a lot that surprises me anymore.
yeah.
And in some ways, like that's good because I'm kind of prepared for anything.
You're desensitized to the weird stuff is what it is. Well, with that, Jen, always great chatting, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon, which I always look forward to. So with that, we can end it, but have a great rest of the week, and thanks for hopping on.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
See you.